Okay guys, welcome to another Trials tutorial. Today we are going to set up a first-person game, and this is just simple controls for a first-person game. Any optimization and modifying after is up to you. Let's load it up. I created a series of different points so to help you set it up. This took me a while to set it up. I used Trials Fusion. I used the Trials Evolution first-person example and transferred it over to Fusion. Fusion obviously works a lot different than Evolution, and there's a few bugs that are more common than in Evolution. So as we go in, we're going to see what is happening here. The blue arrows is sending a signal to that object. The red arrows are kind of like filter signals to the object. The green arrows are sending mathematical or corresponding signals to a target, and the green dotted arrows is sending an indication that it's connected to that target. And any blue arrows are obviously trigger indicators, so just keep that in mind when you are looking at these pre-made player card links that I just created. That took me hours to create because I ran into a lot of bugs with the Fusion editor. That's not common in the so with this, you see all the corresponding targets are linked, and then when we press test game, we will have the writer. We could look left, we could look left, we look right, left, up, and then down. We could move, and when we move, it starts making footsteps. Move back and forward and all the way around. Now, in order to make this all work, we have to go to, at the 3-minute mark, this is called corresponding, obviously I spelled it wrong, and targets. You will have position X, position Y, and position Z. Those are your center point map coordinates. They'll be conspiring with this object position event known as the OPE. And the OPE will be corresponding with the camera and the game. Now I said that wrong. It's only going to be corresponding with the camera, right? And when you set up these coordinates and this Y position, the Y position controls how high any of these obstacles are compared to the ball. So I set the value to this at a 1.25. The higher the number, the higher it's going to be above the game character. The lower the number, the lower it's going to be below the game character. So just keep that in mind. Now I will go through each one so you can see what I'm doing. Obviously I did a 1.5 operand, and I connected the operand to this y-axis target. All these y-axis target, when you multi-select all of them, make sure to select object, and you must select the game character corresponding. Now, position X and position Z are linked to the position X and blue Z's up there, and position Y is linked to the plus, minus, and times divide player card over there. Now I'm gonna look at this again, make sure you have all these options checked or it won't work. Make sure it's abled, modify position, modify rotation, yeah. That's it. Everything else should have been default. And make sure local is not on for this one, and set rotation is not on. Okay. Now this will be selecting event targets will be all 4 of these directional inputs. This, and if you want a sound source or anything reacting to it, you can select multiple more targets. Anything within the range will be always linked, you see, corresponding targets. So make sure you keep that in mind. These are called the center point of the map. We'll be using a yellow custom camera, and this and the ball, which is invisible. I'm gonna go to the ball now. Oh yeah, make sure your physics bubble is keep position and follow the invisible sphere, and your center point pieces for your your game character should be physics on 50,000 kilograms. You could adjust angular damping and linear damping for movability of the ball. Restitution can also adjust it to. This can adjust how much bounce it has. Make sure it's contact response or your ball will fall through the floor. Make sure none of these are on. Collision, you could add it, but then it wouldn't sound like footsteps. Those are the ball properties. Now all these properties are the same. I'm just going to open up one. Make sure it's abled. Make sure it's at least 10 meters. Make sure it is at 5,000 directional force. You could do whatever you want, but make sure all 4 of them have the same directional force value. Make sure it doesn't have any applied damage or inverted. Make sure none of these, and you can obviously select object instances. You see? Blue dotted lines. And that's the property manager for the directional forces inputs controls. Now we're going to go to player controls. Player controls are a little easy. So what you need to do is you need to select down, left, right, up, left stick coordinates. Then inside this, the same for all, make sure you use activate diagonal, which activates the diagonals of the top, which is top left and top right. Make sure it's on down to on and on release to off. When all those are correct, just go to both state events, multi-select, and select the right directional pad for the input. Do that for all of them and you have your ball controls working properly. Next we will go to action button controls. Obviously in Trials Fusion there's a little problem with the action controls from the example from Evolution. So what you need to do is, the only way you can make this work is with area triggers. That's the only way that I have found out. If there's a better way, please let me know, or you could find it in the forums or something by asking one of the professionals at Red Links. So here is me pressing the Y button on, press on, and it creates a delay, and that's how you make action controls for the ball. Now this is footsteps loop, left and right, forwards and backwards. So it's the same thing. The same thing. All you have to do is make sure it's on diagonal. and make sure you have the same thing with the ball controls, but this time you're gonna hit all the unhit targets on the on event for the thing. Make sure your interval is at every 1 second, and reset when able is on for all intervals linked to the sound source. The sound source will be obviously targeted in the center. Okay, so the reason why I set it up like this is because it will, at every tick, it will do an interval. Okay, but when the player is constantly holding down one of the sticks, it will make the sound of him walking. When the player stops and releases the stick, he will make no more footsteps. This is how I made my footsteps. If there is a better way, by all means use that. Now the most complicated one of them all is the camera controls. So for the camera controls, what you need is one of these. Another object position event. And the object position event, make sure it's at abled, not modify position. Modify rotation is on and local is on. Make sure pitch is on. And any other object that you see here, make sure it's exactly like this. Now the pitch will be linked to this, and the yaw will be linked to the main one for the camera controls to work with the camera. Now on the bottom one, we're going to use a variable data source and make sure its interpolate is on. Set it to this setting, interpolation speed 5, max step 12. The same should be on the other one as well. Now make sure you select a value target and make sure the arrows are pointing downwards, calculating downwards. Select the value target and select it here, same with this on this end. Now, with another variable data source, make sure you just put one right here and one right here. That's all you have to do. Now, make sure you grab an interval and you set it to 1 tick and select event filter and put it here, and then grab the set value event, set it to increase, select the value and put it up here to this player card, and then after select an event and filter and select it over here. Now with this value event, just do the same thing. Value event target, put it up there. And an event filter, make sure you put it on the generic filter. Now the generic filter has to be a value 2 of 85, has to be greater, and a comparison value has to go down here. Now in the greater event, again, make sure the true is on set value here, and the greater value will be sending a false impulse to this area, and make sure this is set to less, negative 85, comparison value, press Y to select a value and put it on this event over here. Then I want you to grab false event and link it to this target. On this set value event, make sure the value is negative 85 and default set. Same with this one, except this one's going to be positive 85 and default set. Select event targets, this. Same with this one to this one. Now once you get that in place, make sure the negative event is an operand with this divide event. And make sure this divide event is an operand 2.00 and the operand is right stick horizontal value for the horizontal directional view of the camera. And make sure that the divide is 200 and the operand of the vertical value of the right stick camera, so it can move in a vertical position. Now once you get that in place, your camera controls should work. If it doesn't work, or if I was going too fast, you could always use the YouTube feature to slow down the video or pause the video. Now I probably never explained this, but these two OPEs must have an interval to make everything work. The interval must be set to 1 tick, 16 milliseconds, to activate the impulse between the impulses. Now, that was probably a very hard mathematical equation for people that are not used to math, or know it, or not at a high school level for mathematics. If you're not at a high school grade mathematics, you may not understand these technical inputs and mathematical inputs. But as the school system may be getting more advanced, as I am aging quite a bit, maybe nowadays, maybe in elementary programs, they may teach you this. But this is how you make a first-person controls with footstep movements. You can adjust the sensitivity using the corresponding targets and other set value events. And I hope I explained this correctly. This is almost near a 20-minute tutorial, but it is a very hard tutorial because it took me hours to figure these all equations out. Sometimes you just gotta grab a pen and paper and write all this information down if it doesn't make sense to you. That's how it helped me. Now I used extrax function to give my custom player units a name. Each group of player cards linked together corresponding with a different set of targets all do its thing for the first-person controls. Now, once I figure out the third-person controls, I will make a different tutorial, which is probably going to be linked to this tutorial. Using this input system for the right stick tutorial may be useful for the third-person tutorial, so just keep that in mind to further modify the camera's rotations. So, although this tutorial is very good, just follow what I did and you should be able to have the same thing I did. If you run into problems, start destroying some of the inputs and seeing if you can identify the problem. I've had problems where the camera would be in two places at the same time, flickering back and forth, because I've made one set local and another set local, and those sets shouldn't be combined. Understanding this type of knowledge and information, you have to understand input control or game design similar to that to make it in Trials. Trials is a motorcycle game, but it has the ability to make your own game in first-person controls. It's Trials, it's not perfect, but at least you could do something with it and make your own first-person controls. All I know is this is how you make first-person controls on Trials Fusion. So for those who had difficulties transferring over, now I'm guessing you have a live commentary tutorial on how it's done. Now making first-person maps is good because then you could make first-person game modes more realistically with animations and sound sources. Like I'm going to build a Resident Evil or some sort of map first person based with these controls. Just be creative and try to come up with ways to make it better. Now let's test out the controls again. Everything seems to be working well. My left and right work well. My up and my down work well. And I make footsteps. And I stop and it doesn't. Very good. Now you can save the whole thing using an area effector or area selector and then save it all as one object like I did already. Let's go to your favorites and already saved my own. So I hope this tutorial was useful. I'll be making more in the future. When I figure out third-person controls, I'll also make a tutorial based on that so you can see out layouts. I didn't start from scratch because even I am kind of good at trials making, but this is a pretty advanced setup for a first-person controls, and even though I did get this from the first-person example from Trials Evolution, so that's why I didn't go from scratch, because it was a little bit hard to understand and a lot of mathematical calculations and inputs. So I hope this helped. I hoped I see more first-person games. I seen a couple and I wanted to make my own. So this is my tutorial for you guys to make your own first-person game. Alright, I'll see you on my next tutorial.